Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Modern Church Leader. Here with my buddy all the way from Dallas, Texas, Gregory Love. How's it going, Greg?
We're doing great here in Fort Worth, Texas.
Let's go. Well, man, it's great to have you on the show. You are, you're kind of the expert in child abuse prevention, and you are a lawyer, and you started a great company, Ministry Safe. And you've been at this for a long time. So I'd love for you just to tell folks a little bit about yourself and how you got into serving the church in this way.
Yeah, I mean, of course, as a believer, I'm interested in serving the church. I mean, after doing like 29 years of student ministry,
Yeah.
but professionally, it's not like I was in law school in the 80s and decided, one day I want to be a sexual abuse lawyer. Okay. First of all, that's weird. Second of all, there was no such thing back then. Kind of the way all of
There's
this
no degrees.
unfolded.
You couldn't pick your school and find the degree in that.
No, that was a thin listing. All right. But nonetheless, it's like, my wife, who's my law partner, Kimberly, I mean, she was an employment lawyer by trade as early as like 1992, okay, back when we used to draw on cave walls, okay? So back then, there was a seminary student that was trying to work with children in a group home, and they fired him for trying to report child sexual abuse, okay? Which in Texas, you can fire someone for just about anything, but you can't fire them for trying to report under the mandatory reporting requirements. And of course, not only did they fire him just to make their point and don't mess with us, they told him, they blamed him for being the abuser. It's like, we'll teach you. Now, what they didn't know was that they forced him to sue them. Because you see, if he wants to work with children, you can't go get a job working with children when you just lost your last job for ostensibly molesting them.
Right.
So he went to look for a Christian employment lawyer, and he went and he found my wife. Okay. So Kimberly's smart enough to know you don't make a lot of money representing a part-time seminary student who's fired for being a molester. But she heard his story, she believed him, and it made her mad. And Frank, you and I are smart enough to know don't make Kim mad. All right. So Kim took his case, which is essentially a whistleblower claim back then. But part of a case like that in 1992 is we had to go find the people that were claiming to have been sexually and physically abused to kind of support the fact that he was making a good faith claim. Now, when she and I went back and talked to some of these people, it's amazing how many of these people wanted to tell their story and said, hey, will you be my voice too? Kimberly's like, absolutely. Let's let them hear from you. Not knowing that she was essentially putting together a multi-plaintiff litigation against this group home after we talked to 49 victims of abuse, covering a 30-year period of time with multiple molesters. I mean, this was a petri dish of yuck, all right?
Right.
And it just wound up growing at the same time the Catholic Church was starting its adventure into child sexual abuse litigation. Now, ours resolved before theirs did and had people from all over the country calling and saying, hey, we didn't know that was worth money. Will you help us jump in on this fact? Will you help us sue this organization? Now, most of them were wanting us to sue a church. Kim and I realized, whoa, part of our desire is to teach the church. And the church is not necessarily teachable when they feel like you're suing them on this side.
Right.
So we decided now we're immersed in the issue. Okay. Now we're standing over how this works. We're seeing the patterns. But see, that pattern is a good word in child sexual abuse work. See, if something has a pattern, it's predictable.
Right.
And if something's predictable, it's preventable.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's just not intuitive. So Kimberly and I were using all of this background education experience that we've developed in 5 or 6 years of litigating on behalf of victims and designed, these are the things these organizations should have had in place so that there would have been no victims. Okay. It's developing a safety system, which we now call a 5-part safety system. I know, brilliant, catchy title, huh? Okay. But it's 5 main pieces because this is what we learned from litigation. And we're going to try to now provide that before there's a train wreck so people can start to access those resources, because we looked around and decided, like, certainly somebody's doing this.
Right.
And as hard as we look, like, there is no one. Clearly hearing God telling us, no, I want you guys to do this. Now, I remember complaining to the Lord. It's like, look, we're in the job business. Okay. We need to make money, feed the little kid you gave us. Okay. We can make money in litigation. There's not a lot of money to be made in prevention, especially when you're talking to the church, especially in the mid 90s. Okay. But nonetheless, that was the calling on our lives. So started being obedient and building this. And sadly, it got to the point, Frank, that like, I've got chemo. I'm just waiting for the church to wake up to its cancer.
Mm,
So we've spent the last 20, 25 years refining, because you see, the problem hasn't changed. Our children's and student ministries, by and large, haven't changed, but our culture has changed and it's
right,
getting angry. So here it all is. Come and get it.
right, right. So it started with the litigation. How long did you said 5 years. So was it kind of a 5 year journey where you're like, oh, wow, we can take a bunch of the things we learned because we interviewed so many victims and so many different cases where you learned like, here's the patterns. Now let me put it into, uh, you know, some form of training. And then Ministry Safe was born, or was it you started doing kind of training and coaching because churches were calling you, and then one day you woke up and you're like, oh, we should create a company that does this? Like, what was the transition from cases to, starting Ministry Safe as as a business, like as a company serving the church?
Yep. Well, we didn't stop litigating. Okay. That was an ongoing.
Kept
Now, of course,
happening.
we won't sue the church, but the narrow area in which Kim and I will continue to litigate is in the narrow context of children that were victimized in cult settings where someone has abused and manipulated that religious structure to harm a child.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is ongoing, but it's like created all these resources, and we're working with mostly secular organizations at that point. Church didn't want this, not even our home church at first.
Mm,
But see, it was a lot of our foster care entities, our adoption entities, some of the people that are on the front line of this risk that don't need to be convinced it's real.
right.
So it started to grow. Now, it got to the point in about 2007 with one enormous crisis that I won't identify, to where it became valuable for the organization to be able to message to its parents that it's safe to bring your kids back to camp. They needed something to brag about and something to show them this is what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, they were in litigation and needed to be able to have some private conversations. So it's that when we realized we created Ministry Safe as opposed to the law firm, which is Love and Norris,
Mm-hmm.
because we split these up kind of like this. Love and Norris is like the 9/11 Commission. Okay, it can climb into the ditch and help you evaluate your ditch-like and crater-like experience. Ministry Safe is like Homeland Security. Okay, these are the preventive tools that need to have a front-facing talk about this, share this with your parents, let them know this is what we're doing to address this foreseeable risk.
Right.
That was about 2006.
Okay. And churches weren't super into it yet. It was early, new, whatever. But since then, we're in 2024 now. Now you serve, thousands of churches. So what's that journey been like because that's your heart, your passion, you wanted to help the church and help kids. So like, how did it start working in churches? Like, how did that open up?
Well, that's a difficult question because you see, yeah, you're right. We're serving thousands of churches, like 25,000 at this count, probably be 35,000 maybe by February of 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go, whoa, what a great job, thousands of churches. But see, my heart is for the body of Christ, not a count. And when I realized there's 375,000 churches out there, in 25 years, I'm serving less than 10% of them. Okay, I don't have another 25 years in me.
Right.
And so my heart is a urgency that the fields are white in terms at least the risk. But see, even rewinding, it's not like the church finally went, oh, hey, I get this, because that's not the way the church behaves. Church is a stubborn bride. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So frankly, you can go back and you can do a timeline that certain segments of the population, usually by industry, are waking up by virtue of whatever crisis is nearby.
Got it.
Whether it was the Catholic Church, whether it was Penn State, whether it was USA Swimming, which is what made the Olympic Committee call us to help design the Safe Sport program.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then there was USA Gymnastics in 2015. Okay, then we had Boy Scouts of America in 2020, 21. I mean, so it's these different crises wake different people up to certain degrees. And of course, denominations are having their own crisis. As you know, the Southern Baptist Convention has been very driven by media and crisis starting in 2018, 2019. Mm-hmm. And so the church is just a funny bride.
Yeah.
And so it's not like the church has finally awakened, because there's a whole lot more work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
I can't make it move faster. And
Right.
that's why the Lord has led me to buy a yoga mat, a puppy room, and, all kinds of things like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
You went with the puppy room and not goat yoga. So you got the yoga
no,
mat. You just no
I
didn't.
tried goat yoga, and I tried the wrong kind of goats because I was envisioning the little baby goats that jump. These are like the old goats that bite.
Yeah,
Didn't work out.
no bad. Oh my gosh. Well, so fast forward, we're here today. Like, I guess in all of this, your big passion is like training and equipping churches. Like, you want to help prevent this from happening. So, how have you gone about doing that? Like, what's kind of the hallmark of what Ministry Safe does for churches?
Part of it is born out of the crisis.
Right.
Okay, because
Yeah.
if there was just like one, oh, hey, everybody just needs a blue pill, I'll just go start manufacturing blue pills and handing them out. So when we're standing over the crisis and doing the forensic work and the postmortems on what went wrong and why, once I help people understand what this risk is for the sake of having the Q&A with those people in the ditch,
Mm-hmm.
it's the 5 words that I hate the most. Now that you mention it, it's like, I hate those 5 words. Okay. I don't want you to get into a crisis and look back and go, oh, now that you mentioned it, I'm smarter now. Even after all these people got hurt, now I can move forward. It's like, what is it that I can do to keep us from that ditch-like experience? And what we learned early on is education. I can tell people, you know what, we need to stop sexual abuse. And 100 out of 100 people will tell me, I agree with you
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely.
But see, when I go into my churches, they think they're solving the problem. Okay, which is why this is my diagnostic question. I can ask this with a smile, so I don't sound like a lawyer with a clipboard. It's like, hey, what do you do at your organization? What do you do at your camp? What do you do at your church to protect children from child sexual abuse?
Yeah.
And they give me that Sunday morning smile and they make what I call the Christian list. And that Christian list, that background checks, child check-in system, 6-month member rule, 2 adult rule, video cameras, officer on duty with a uniform or, in plain clothes, like that list will not protect my child.
Mm.
Okay. And so the barrier to overcome with the church is not that sexual abuse is an important deal, but they think they're solving this problem and they're not. And that wake up call typically doesn't happen until they have a ditch-like experience.
Right. Like, there's they think they're doing things. I'm not an expert, but I'm assuming they've heard somewhere, here's the things you need to do, depending on your church and your, if you have a building or how all the things, but here's the list. Yeah. You have security, you have cameras, you have check-in, you have background checks. So they're doing that, but you're going like, that's all of those things are like fine and probably good, but that's not what actually does it. Those are like secondary to the core thing. So like, what are the things that do it? Like what do you train churches on to help them, spot this kind of behavior or, just be more educated on what really prevents it?
Yeah. And the magic word there is not just training. Okay. There's all kinds of training out there. It's specific information to allow people to understand this is the risk and this is what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of peeking behind the curtain, most people misunderstand what is sexual abuse risk. Okay. They think it's the white van with free candy written on the side of it, driven by a guy with a clown suit. Okay. Yeah. It's the stranger danger idea.
Right.
And so part of the training is deconstructing your misconception to make room for the information you need to have. And the need to have information is your risk is from an offender we call the preferential offender, not the abduction offender. So when I ask people, hey, what do you do to protect children from child sexual abuse? And they give me that list, that's what I call the barbed wire fence. It's to keep the abduction offender out. You see, like a barbed wire fence around your garden, it'll protect your garden from the cattle, but the bunnies, it's absolutely worthless. Okay. So I'm building a fence. I think it solves my problem. And you know what? As it relates to the abduction offender, it is solving that problem. Merry Christmas. Well done. You're doing a great job. But I need for my people to understand the abduction offender represents less than 10% of the problem. So as it relates to that minute part of the problem, your little barbed wire fence is crushing it. Keep it up. But see, if I could have asked a better question earlier, it would have been, even though no one would have understood me, what are you doing to protect children from the preferential offender? generally the response is, I'm sorry, the who from the what?
Right. Right.
Okay. If
Yeah.
you have no idea what I'm talking about, you're wide open on more than 90% of the problem. So every headline you and I have read, 80,000 Boy Scout claims, none of those 80,000 scouts were abducted, preferential offender,
Right.
or peer sexual abuse. So the better question is, what do I need to teach you about the preferential offender to give you eyes to see, which leads to a mouth that speaks? That's the magic.
Right. Right. And preferential offender, tell us what that is. I'm assuming that's people that, we know it's maybe the kids ministry worker, or it's the parent volunteer, or it's the uncle or the grandma. Like, it's somebody, inside that is a known person. The kids know them, and they're maybe even known by the church, kind of thing. But that's where the 90% of the danger is.
Yeah, first of all, it's what it's not. It's not the stranger wearing the trench coat with the Beanie Babies.
Right.
Okay. It's typically somebody, here's definitionally preferential offender. Could be male or female, someone with an age appropriate adult willing to have sex with them, but prefers a child as a sexual partner. It's what we call a deviant sexual desire. You prefer a child as a sexual partner. Okay. And it's not just any child, it's usually a child within an age and sex of preference. Okay. So there's some narrowness to the deviance. Case in point, go to Penn State. Jerry Sandusky, preferential offender. He wasn't abducting anyone. He was grooming children for abuse because he had an age and sex of preference for boys ages 9 to 14. Larry Nasser of USA Gymnastics, no visual profile would have told you he was dangerous. He'd have passed your background check. But he was a preferential offender, though he was married and had an age-appropriate adult willing to have sex with him. He preferred girls ages 10 to 15. It's messed up. Okay. No visual profile will help us identify that problem. And that's the big idea, Frank. You can't recognize this risk visually. We must understand this risk behaviorally.
Right.
And those behaviors are called the grooming process.
Right.
So answering one of your questions earlier, what's the magic in the training is teaching people first, undoing a lot of these things we're rolling with that we think are the right answers that are not. I've got to make room for good information first,
right.
Deconstruct that, and then bring the good information, which is your problem is the preferential offender. You can't recognize him visually. You must understand him or her behaviorally, and the behaviors are called the grooming process. And there we go.
And here it is. Yeah. So your training, talk to us about you. Like, you go around the country educating people all over the place. That's one of the things you do, just as a, it's your passion. It's obviously part of your business, but it's also your passion. So when you go into a new, church or denomination, how are you guiding them through some of this training? Like, where do you start?
Typically, I'm going to have a conversation with somebody who's a decision maker to help them understand this is what the risk is so they can downstream that to their member churches if it's a hierarchical denomination. Baptists, for example, Nazarenes, oftentimes those have to learn this church by church by church, okay, unless somebody is downstreaming good information to them. But what I'd first like to do is, I know what the barriers are, Frank. It's like I've learned 1,800 ways to fail at this. And I can't even get a door to open to come do some live training unless somebody first understands there's a training worth having.
Right.
Okay. So part of the communication is exactly what I've already gone through at the denominational and leadership level. It's, please don't presume you understand this problem correctly and have a solution.
Right.
Okay.
And they're coming to you, like you said before, potentially because there was a crisis, or maybe there was a nearby crisis, like something that, maybe it wasn't them, but it was like someone they knew, or it was another organization that they were close to, or something that sparks it. And so then sounds like that's when they're a bit more open to listening to you.
All right. It's like when the Catholic Church got into the ditch, like all these Protestants were looking at like, woo, at least we're not Catholics. Like, right. Are you high?
Yeah.
That's the wrong takeaway.
Yeah.
It's the exact same grooming process. They just had a different liturgy and form of worship.
Right.
Okay, so denominations are funny that they'll see something happen in that denomination and believe that the reason why they had a problem is because of our theological distinction, or until it becomes yours. So it's the church leaders, humans are really good at hearing about somebody else's crisis and then looking at themselves and finding a way in which to help them understand it's not my crisis until it is. Now we're seeing a lot of change in just the human response to, but we're also seeing, Frank, is insurance companies are feeling this. Okay. Because you see, it used to be to settle a sexual abuse claim in the 90s was about $250,000 per victim. That number has steadily grown as our culture, which makes up our jurors, get angrier and angrier about the fact that this was allowed to happen in a place that children should have been safe.
Right.
So today, actually in 2023, it's up to $2.5 million per victim for an insurance carrier to settle
Wow.
that case. It's 10.3 million per victim if it goes to trial.
Wow.
Okay, so financially, the insurance carriers are saying, we can't pay that and just increase your premiums a little bit. So all the insurance carriers that write coverage for churches and child serving organizations are essentially saying, we are not renewing your coverage unless you do something at your church to make it safer there so that we won't get a claim.
Right.
And interestingly, they're requiring them to use Ministry Safe.
Right. Yeah. So what does the training look like? You obviously go out and do stuff, but you had to do this in a way that scales to thousands of churches. Like, I don't assume Greg can fly around every single day of his life training every church on the planet. So you've created, it started back in, 07 or so, but now you've built a whole kind of infrastructure to train churches. What does that look like? If a new church comes in and they're like, yep, we want to do this, how do they get the training and deliver it to their volunteers?
Yeah, it's like much like online giving, COVID was a game changer in terms of the use of technology to accomplish things.
Right.
Even in ministry, it always seems like ministries are 10 years behind everybody else in leveraging technology. But so my wife, Kimberly, and I, we're on 5 airplanes a week going in certain directions to be able to teach at this seminary or this conference or this denomination or go help this organization navigate a ditch. And then COVID hit and shut down most of the travel.
Right.
Now we're already an online tech business that's delivering content and make it scalable online. And now we don't get all the people complaining like in 2007 about their dial up or their bandwidth and things
Right.
like that. So all of it was prepared to be scaled. We just needed the market to start understanding they need it and then start asking for it.
Right.
And so COVID forced everybody to get a Zoom account, everybody to get some type of form to communicate to their stakeholders electronically. And we were already positioned to do that.
Yeah.
So
pre-COVID, probably like you, we were getting, trying to do online meetings and, you'd spend a certain percentage of those meetings educating the, church person that we were trying to get with, like, how do you get on a Zoom meeting or a Google Meet or a GoToMeeting, whatever the platform was. Like, okay, open your browser, click this link, do this, to get it to work. Like that happened all the time, but COVID hits and like, not anymore. Everybody knows how to use Zoom and online tools and is comfortable doing things kind of on camera and on their computer.
Yeah. So we used COVID to refilm with very, very professional crews, the basic sexual abuse awareness training, but that's not the only content that ministry leaders or child serving organizational leaders need. So we created the peer-to-peer sexual abuse,
right.
Understanding the risk of third-party liability when you let people use your facilities, understanding background checks, sexual harassment. I mean, there's like 23 separate offerings that we create because there's a lot of organizations that need more than just sexual abuse awareness training. Now that's the core piece, and we're training about 100,000 people online per month right now.
Wow.
And just issued our 4 millionth certificate of completion. Okay, there's a golden ticket winner right there. They're going to get a mug, all right?
Sending something like that's...
Yeah, no doubt. And so leveraging technology to deliver content has really kept me off airplanes, but it also allows us to live stream certain training. And it's driven typically by the crisis that a particular industry is having. So we did one for an insurance carrier with about 900 people on. It's peer-to-peer sexual abuse to prepare camps across the country.
Yeah.
Or after Boy Scouts, like when, holy cow, someone's using our facilities and we could wind up in the same ditch. So we'll provide instruction. So we can craft it and customize it. But of the things that we know there's a demand for, we filmed it, produced it, and have an online system to be able to deliver that at scale.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty cool. What, when churches are going through this, You've kind of shared a lot. The crisis moment kicks it off, things like that. But when you get into the training on the kind of the behaviors and the pattern matching and the grooming process, like where does the light bulb go off for church leaders? Where do
Okay,
they
well,
like go, oh, I get it, and they kind of fully buy in and get excited about things?
well, there's a different light bulb moment depending on who you are, and that's why we've done the training in such a way, and some of the workshops that we do are meant to address, okay, third of the room is going to light bulb at this issue, 25% of you on this issue. So, but the top light bulb issue typically is it's not the abduction offender.
Hmm.
Okay. It's
Like that point is
helping
like
them.
people don't even get it. They're like,
And, and even,
oh,
and even saying that's not enough
right,
because I go, oh, come on, say what? It's like, no, no, no. Let's come at it this way. It's like, the way we're naturally wired to protect children, even our own children, is based on this concept called stranger danger.
right, yeah,
Okay.
totally,
It's this idea, if I don't know you and you look different from me, I presume you are unsafe and I act accordingly. But see, the opposite is true, that if you do look like me and you're on the inside of my community, I presume you are safe.
right,
The preferential offender is on the inside. And if the preferential offender isn't already on the inside, that's what the preferential offender wants to do, is get on the inside. Preferential offender is not going to come up to my door and knock on my door and say, excuse me, I know you don't know me, but is that your little girl out there swinging? She's lovely. Can I take her to my house for just an hour? We'll make cookies. I'll bring her right back.
right,
I'm in Texas. What do you think I'm going to do? Right? But see, the preferential offender knows that. So the idea is the preferential offender wants to first win my trust, get on the inside, then the barriers of protection of the child go down.
mm-hmm,
So once I've explained that, and now, because this is so ubiquitous, 1 out of 4 Americans has been sexually victimized. So when you're talking to people, they're going, now that circumstance that we had in our family 10 years ago makes sense. You're just providing language to an experience I didn't understand.
right,
That's what was happening in that volunteer in our student ministry. It's almost like you see the light bulb come on, and typically there's going to be something they remember. It's like, that explains it.
right,
Or I was being groomed. I wasn't sexually abused, but I knew it felt weird and I just couldn't put my finger on what it was. And so the training actually provides language to have people
mm-hmm,
understand experience. So those are generally where you start seeing the light bulbs come on. And even from those people who have been victimized that aren't talking about it. And you start walking through this and it's almost like, there it is. That's okay. And now I'm satisfied that I'm not the only one.
right,
There was nothing wrong with me. There was not me that was dressed in a certain way, acting a certain way that made that person choose me. Okay. So it's a multifaceted way in which this information is being processed by the hundreds of thousands of people that are consuming this information every
right,
couple months.
right, yeah, yeah. That's I mean, it's incredible what you guys do. What like if you're getting with church leaders now and you're into the portion where you're talking about the grooming process, like give us the short version of what that process looks like and how church leaders can, if they're watching this video, if they picked up with a couple things and want to go learn more, but what's the key points in the grooming process?
Okay, what I'd want to do first, regardless of who the audience is set up the idea that the preferential offender has a deviant sexual desire, and age and sex of preference of that deviant sexual desire is going to drive where they seek access.
Right.
So if it's somebody with a deviant sexual desire for 5-year-olds, daycares, pre-Ks, kindergartens, children's ministries, okay, it narrows where we gather those types of children in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
The church, we gather them all.
Right.
Okay, so we're a target, regardless of the age and sexual preference, is helping people understand they want to go from the outside to the inside. Okay, and what that means of going on the inside at a church is they're going to need a name tag. Okay, whether you're going to pay them or not, staff member or volunteer, they're going to work to go through your process. So that's one of the first challenges to the church. How hard is it to get a name tag at your church?
Right.
And is that different depending on the program? And then what the abuser is going to do is gain access, which is typically grooming the gatekeepers. It's grooming the adult leaders. It's going through anybody the abuser has to go through to gain trusted time alone with the child. Okay. So it's going to be gaining access. then selecting one or more children in such a way that the child is chosen by virtue of how easy is it for the abuser to carve that little one away from the herd into isolation for trusted time alone, where there will be inappropriate touch and talk.
Right.
Okay, along that way, there will be the introduction of nudity and sexual touch through sexual discussion, sexual joking, sexual banter, and now we get the opportunity to get refined depending on who the audience is, because see, the grooming process now will take on a different feel if it's a teenage girl versus a teenage boy, or if it's in a youth sport program,
Right.
or an overnight camping. This is typically how this unfolds. Okay, so that's when we generally can go as deep as you want if we get the opportunity to get in front of people and refine it. And then ultimately, the grooming process kind of has wrapped into the whole situation of keeping the victim quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Shame, embarrassment, threat. Number one reason why a sexual abuse victim won't tell you, no one will believe me.
Right.
Sadly, most of the times, we don't.
Right.
Okay, so this instruction also tries to take that stinger out so that the grooming process can be unpacked where people can see it, but also give courage for those people to say something with an audience that will receive it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What about the impact? Like, you guys have been at this, you said 25 years. You've trained thousands, millions of people, thousands of churches. Like, what kind of impact have you seen over the course of 25 years?
That used to be a difficult question to answer when people would ask with an attitude of, well, can you prove it works?
Yeah. No, I mean, like, I know you've had an impact. I want to hear the stories of like where you've seen it,
Here's what we got. Two things that just happened today. All right. We get a feedback from an educator, and educators are hard because they'll be getting sexual abuse trainings for years and years and years. And
Right.
here's an educator actually out of San Lorenzo, California. The Ministry Safe course was outstanding. I've been a Christian school teacher for 45 years and seen a lot of videos and trainings on this topic, but this was one of the best I've seen. Clear, informative, authoritative, efficiently and effectively communicated. Thank you for putting it together and make it easy to access. Okay. Getting compliments like that from my educators is pretty huge.
Right.
Okay. But there's also something that happened even this weekend, in the Southern Baptist Convention. They voted for and got a new president. Okay. And he pastors a church in North Carolina. And that church has had a challenge recently involving a student ministry volunteer. And this was actually came out in that Baptist publication. This says, regarding sexual abuse reform, Presley spoke on his church recently reporting a case involving a student ministry volunteer. And he goes on to say, the SBC is much further down the road than we've ever been, he said, on the convention's steps toward abuse. In 2018, we weren't even talking about abuse. Hickory Grove's use of Ministry Safe prepared volunteers for the situation no church wants to face. We knew what to do, and so when the crisis hit, our people responded, said Presley. Okay, it's like, I've never met the man,
right?
But it's an encouragement. And we hear those types of things all the time, that we're not blindsided anymore.
Yeah.
You've given us the language. You've given us eyes to see, which leads to a mouth that speaks, not only to prevent it, but in the, God forbid, a circumstance that does unfold, we can at least start to navigate it well, so that we don't compound the crisis, re-victimize victims, and some of the things that all the social media says that we're bad at, which most of the times they're right.
Right. Yeah. No, I love that. Those are cool. Man, it's awesome what you guys are doing. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Where should folks go to learn more about Ministry Safe and sign up for the trainings if they're not already taking them?
Yep. Ministrysafe.com, and it's all very, very intuitive.
Yeah.
You can download information. You can preview things. You can call one of my staff members. They'll find them extremely generous, whether you're a cowboy church out in the sticks or whether you're a mega church with multiple campuses. We're easy to find. Access to content is easy to get. And just hear me say, if you're one of those churches that really says, I can't afford it, okay? And if I believe you, now remember, people lie to me for a living, I'll give it to you. I don't want ever there to be money being a reason why we can't be able to protect our children from sexual abuse. I'll pay for it. Frank, I know you're going to be right behind me, and you'll pay for it right after me.
Amen. 100%. That's so good. Ministrysafe.com. Guys, go check it out. Greg, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Frank.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Definitely spread the word on this show. Go check out Ministry Safe, and we'll see you guys next week on another episode of Modern Church Leader. Bye-bye.